The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the town square. The park was alive with a medley of sounds: children's laughter, the chirping of sparrows, the distant hum of traffic on Main Street. It was a picture-perfect evening, one where the air carried a soft, sweet warmth, hinting at the tail end of summer. Amid the bustle, Sophia sat quietly on an old wooden bench under the sprawling shade of an ancient oak tree. A novel rested on her lap, its corners dog-eared from countless readings. Sophia tried to focus, but her golden retriever, Max, had other plans. The playful dog trotted back and forth, his tennis ball clutched in his mouth, dropping it at her feet and wagging his tail with an expectant gleam in his big brown eyes. "All right, Max," Sophia said with a reluctant chuckle, tossing the ball with a flick of her wrist. It soared through the air before landing in the grass, where Max bolted after it with unrestrained enthusiasm. Watching him brought a rare smile to Sophia's lips, though the weight of the day still clung to her. At 32, Sophia carried herself with a quiet grace. Her dark, curly hair framed a face that hinted at exhaustion, but also resilience. Amy, and her caramel-toned skin caught the fading sunlight, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the slight furrow in her brows, a sign of a mind that seldom rested. Dressed in comfortable jeans and a soft yellow sweater, she exuded an effortless charm, though she'd always been too modest to recognize it. Moving to this town had been her way of starting fresh, but Sophia often felt like an outsider. Whispers in grocery store aisles, half-hearted smiles from neighbors, and the occasional cold glance at the local cafe reminded her that not everyone was eager to welcome new faces, especially ones that didn't quite fit the town's old-fashioned mold. On the opposite side of the park, Harold sat on his usual bench near the rose garden, with neatly combed silver hair and a wardrobe that spoke of wealth. Polished leather shoes, a tailored trench coat, and a felt fedora. Harold looked every bit the retired tycoon. His sharp blue eyes scanned the park, taking in the children's games, the strolling couples, and finally, Sophia. His lips curled into a slight sneer. To Harold, Sophia represented everything that had gone wrong with the town. He longed for the days when faces were familiar, when outsiders knew their place and stayed in the shadows. Gripping his cane, Harold rose to his feet and began making his way towards Sophia. His movements were deliberate, his polished shoes clicking against the cobblestones with a rhythm that seemed to hush the nearby chatter. Max, ever alert, noticed Harold's approach first. He barked, a sharp, protective sound that made Sophia glance up. Her eyes met Harold's stern expression, and her heart sank. "Control your dog," Harold said, his tone cold and clipped. Sophia leaned down, patting Max to calm him. "He's just reacting to you coming closer," she replied evenly, though her voice carried an edge of irritation. Harold chuckled dryly. "Of course, it's never the owner's fault." Typical. He paused, looking her over with thinly veiled disdain. "I don't remember this park being so crowded with new faces. Times have certainly changed, and not for the better." Sophia set her book aside, sitting up straighter. "What exactly are you trying to say?" "I'm saying," Harold began, his voice rising slightly, "that this town used to have standards. People who didn't belong knew to keep their distance. Now it's all chaos. People like you taking up space, disrupting the peace." And a few heads turned in their direction. Harold's words cut through the park's pleasant atmosphere like a knife. Sophia's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "It's funny," she said, standing up to meet Harold's gaze. "You talk about peace, but all I see is you coming over here to cause a scene." Before Harold could retort, a voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." It was Lucas, a young father whose son was riding his bike nearby. He stepped forward, his casual hoodie and jeans a stark contrast to Harold's refined attire. "Sophia's done nothing wrong. You're the one disrupting the peace." Harold turned, his face tightening. "This doesn't concern you." Lucas crossed his arms. "It concerns all of us when someone tries to make others feel unwelcome. This town isn't yours to dictate." A murmur of agreement rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. An elderly woman with a crocheted shawl spoke next. "I've seen Sophia here many times. She's kind, respectful, and part of this community. Maybe it's you who doesn't belong anymore, Harold." Harold's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, another voice chimed in. "She's right," said a teenage girl sitting on the grass with her friends. "The world's changing, and it's about time people like you learn to deal with it." Sophia felt a swell of emotion as more and more people came to her defense. Max wagged his tail as if sensing the shift in energy. Harold, overwhelmed by the collective pushback, muttered something under his breath before storming off, his cane tapping furiously against the pavement. As the crowd began to disperse, Lucas turned to Sophia with a smile. "You handled that better than I would have." Sophia shook her head, still processing what had just happened. happened? I wasn't alone. Thank you for speaking up. The elderly woman patted Sophia's hand gently. Don't let people like him make you doubt yourself. You're as much a part of this town as anyone. Sophia nodded, her eyes glistening. This isn't just about me, though. It's about all of us standing up to that kind of ignorance. Change doesn't happen unless we demand it. Lucas grinned. Well, you've got a whole park full of allies now. As the evening deepened, Sophia walked home, with Max trotting beside her. The golden retriever carried his ball proudly, oblivious to the gravity of the day's events. For the first time in a long time, Sophia felt a glimmer of hope. She'd faced prejudice before, but this time she wasn't alone. The park, once just a place for quiet reflection, had become the backdrop for something bigger, a community standing together against the weight of outdated beliefs. And somewhere in the distance, Harold sat alone in his grand, empty house, his thoughts swirling with doubt. Perhaps the world wasn't as black and white as he'd always believed. Sophia knew there was still work to be done. Prejudice didn't vanish overnight, but as she looked down at Max, his tail wagging in rhythm with her steps, she couldn't help but smile. Every journey began with a single step, and today, they'd taken several. The park's lampposts flickered on, casting a soft glow over the path ahead. And for the first time, the horizon didn't feel so distant. And don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and let me know what you think about the story. See ya!